The following transmission contains unencrypted instances of explicit language. Mature audiences are cleared to proceed.
Judas and the Black Messiah is a 2021 movie dealing with events of 1968 and 69, mostly or maybe all in Chicago. Featured agencies here are the FBI and the Black Panther Party. I hesitate to call the Black Panthers an intelligence operation. I'm even not really sure okay, I get it. They call themselves revolutionaries. They definitely have revolutionary thinking and aims. I don't think we call them insurgents because they're not engaged in active acts of violence. Yeah?
I'm not sure. But I mean, yeah, I think revolutionary or activists would probably be the best. They're definitely politically motivated, so I don't know, political organization.
I'd heard that supposedly they were inspired also by the 1966 movie Battle of Algiers. But from what I'm seeing, except for maybe the emphasis on feeding the people, I don't really see them having learned a lot of lessons from that movie.
Well, this isn't like the birth of the Black Panthers. This is kind of like a one moment in time. This is when they'd already been pretty well established, right? It's just Fred Hampton's kind of climb in the area that the film takes place. From what I understand, this is like not even the beginning or the end. It's just kind of like one story of like, and in like a mole being placed within like a chapter of the Black Panthers.
Right, because Fred Hampton is just the Chicago chairman. It's a national organization. He's not the head of the Panthers per se, although he's coming to a level of prominence that he's on J. Edgar Hoover's radar. So we're going to see him get killed here in 1969. For context on that, Malcolm X was assassinated in 65, Martin Luther King in 1968. The FBI really had a boner for black leaders in the 60s. It's really ridiculous. No fans of Hoover here. I would go so far as to say, yeah, I'm gonna put him. I was thinking like how high he rates. Now, of course, there have been monsters in America prior, but just thinking 20th century or latter half of 20th century. Mm-hmm. I think the short list is J. Edgar, Allen Dulles, and Dick Cheney.
That's one I didn't even really think of. Oh, Reagan. I mean, there's a lot of problems today we could probably blame on Reagan. I mean, he's the one that started taxing Social Security to pay for his big tax cuts.
This movie got its start. It was the Lucas brothers, those identical twin comedians, that first came up with a script for it that was getting shopped around. I think by the time it actually got made and went through all the process, they brought in some different writers, and I'm not sure, they're probably credited as story, but not script. Shaka King, the director, he does not have a lot of movies on his resume. I think this is like his maybe fourth movie, if you don't count like really, really small projects. And it's certainly his first big one. I'm pretty impressed. I haven't got any good trivia for this movie. Well, I guess we could talk about the, overall accuracy on it. It did come to my attention that Bill O'Neill and Fred Hampton, that would be the Judas and the Black Messiah of the title, I don't think they interacted with each other directly as much as we see in this film. The one thing in particular...
Oh, really?
Yeah, the one thing in particular was I know that he wasn't Fred's driver, and that was put into the movie. And looking through it on a second time too, I think I think I can detect that like a lot of the interactions between them are actually kind of could be manufactured for dramatic effect and don't have a huge amount of impact on the story.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, this overall was like really well done. I mean, just right off the bat, the cast is like unbelievable. everybody in the film did such an amazing job. So even if they did like little fudges to like historical reasons, I don't think it really took away from what the point they were trying to make.
Yeah, it's definitely a very pro Black Panther Party movie. Mostly what I knew about Black Panthers going into this was that they were militant, and I'd mostly just heard the stories about them confronting police with openly carried firearms. I don't know
That was
if you.
another thing Reagan did. Because of that, he was the one that went against the Second Amendment
Mm-hmm.
to prevent them from being able to do that. Everything they did was completely legal. Up
Yeah,
until the
California was an open carry state during this period of time.
Yep.
And the one really famous confrontation with a Black Panther and the police is like really difficult to imagine going down now without a lot of people ending up in body bags. But a really interesting aspect or part, weird to think about aspect of the Black Panthers' impact on history is they're semi-responsible for the current NRA that we have today, because the NRA was a much more, I would say, let's see, they were much more focused on responsible gun ownership as opposed to the current like gun ownership at cost of all other concerns that they are today. And they really took that cue from the Black Panther activities.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Never would have thought of that.
I definitely don't know enough about the history to say if the portrayal that we're getting here is overly kind to the Black Panthers. I kind of feel like it might be at least a little, but I think it's also definitely doing a lot of good work in clearing up a lot of misconceptions.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely like on the side of the Black Panthers, like, FBI evil, Black Panthers good guys, or at least Fred Hampton, right? Um, but I think when we both like kind of looked into the historical accuracy, it's pretty spot on. Other than those like small differences with O'Neill and Hampton's interaction, but it definitely, like you say, like it was definitely like a crop out of the entire history of the Black Panthers. So this isn't like the full history of them. It's more of like, here's a story where the FBI infiltrated one group in Chicago, and it was interesting because O'Neill kind of betrayed his people, type of thing.
Yeah, that's well put. And I also like to flag groups, even though these guys are definitely not an intelligence group, but since we usually parse out, fictional from real, the Crowns gang in this movie is that's a fictional version of a Chicago gang.
Oh, really? Were they based on anybody specific, or it was just like, let's just make up a Chicago gang?
I don't know if they were based on anyone specific, but I'm certain. I mean, I feel certain that they're based in, gangs of the time, of the era.
Right. I'm sure there were a bunch of Chicago gangs, and they were like, well, let's just make a group and kind of paint them like they were back then.
I didn't have any trivia for this movie, but I do just want to throw out that a whistle is officially my favorite euphemism for a gun of all time. Can't believe I've never heard that one before, but it's fucking great. It's the best.
That is a good one.
It's better than a piece. It's better than heat. It's yeah.
Or a gat or whatever.
Gat is pretty good too, but whistle is super smooth. Any other thoughts about the movie before briefing room?
No, I'm good to go.
Retinal scan complete. Validating security clearance. Clearance granted. You may now enter the briefing room.
I'm going to start with some very solid plus spy points on picking O'Neill for this operation. I mean, sure, they've got the compromise aspect on him, but, you know, they could have had that on any number of young black men of this time. But this specific initial backstory that we see where he's a car thief that essentially goes around flashing a fake FBI badge and falsely claiming that a car has been reported as stolen, that he needs to take it into custody, really demonstrates to us and would demonstrate to the Mitchell character, his handler, played by Jesse Plemons, that this guy has absolutely demonstrated a capacity to confidently maintain a false persona in very high stakes, high tension situations.
Yeah, I really liked the opening scene where they're kind of recruiting him. I think I have more to say about it as we get down the road, but it's like a guy that's out for himself, you know, and he's put on this act as pretending to be an FBI agent, like holding people up and like confiscating things, and it's obvious, like like when Clemens asked him, "Were you upset when Dr. King was murdered or Malcolm X?" Like he kind of didn't. It didn't bother him. He's just kind of a guy like like a guy on the street that's just out for his and what do they say, like out for me and mine type of thing. And I like that you pointed out that they recognized that he was able to actually maintain a false persona well but I really liked the targeting here, that it was someone that they could kind of groom over time, I guess.
It is a good recruitment scene that gets a lot done in a short amount of time, because we do want to like get to the story,
right?
But I mean, if you wanted to be criminally over analytical, it's weird that Mitchell is showing up like just like hours after the incident, because he's still got the wound on his head, and that he would make him the offer right there on the spot.
Right.
Most likely, or at least I would hope and expect, that there was like a lot more vetting going on in there. I mean, yeah, it's good to ask him, were you upset when Dr. King was murdered or Malcolm X? But I think you're going to want a little more checking into the guy's history and his politics,
right?
Or just sign him up.
Absolutely.
But I'm cool with it.
Right. I did like that line a lot, that a badge is scarier than the gun, when they asked him, well, why pretend to be an FBI agent? That was definitely an impactful line.
Yeah, a badge is scarier than a gun is a very good line. It also definitely lets you know, like, the politics of the movie right up front.
Right.
That is probably the single most, right from the director's lips onto the screen statement that we get.
Absolutely.
I'm chill with getting to see O'Neill when he first signs up and joins the party, that he's just way back there in the low level doing grunt work kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. He's not coming in and going up to just talk to Fred Hampton like right away on day one.
Mm-hmm.
That he takes his time and just spends a lot of time observing. He's a very observant person, which is something else that obviously works out in his favor in this kind of work. After a certain amount of time that, and he's making his reports to Mitchell, figuring out how to get closer to Fred Hampton. Again, it's much more smoothly arranged than just, constantly wanting to talk to him and ask him questions and,
right.
act like he's, he avoids the appearance of trying to insinuate himself in and become a friend or an ally to Fred. But, the idea, and of course it's Mitchell that, coaches O'Neill through it. Like, think about it. Like, what does he need? Like, what is something that, we could help you get, that you could give him, that would make him say like, oh, this guy, I should hang out more with this guy. And of course that's a car in this case, which I don't think was. It's been a while since I listened to the podcast. I listened to a podcast where this guy that was the guest was someone that had grown up in the Black Panther Party. Like his father and uncles were heavily into it. One of my favorite things about that show was him talking about how all the other kids at school would be like constantly like, how do you know so much about the fucking Constitution? You know, and he would be surprised and taken aback because in his family, like that's all they talked about, like over dinner every night was like the Constitution, what's legal, what's not, how things are supposed to be, and matters of that kind. But yeah, that's where I think I got the idea that him being a driver was manufactured for this movie. It's a smart bit of scripting, and it's smart for him too, because I mean what do you want? What's better, even if that's all you do is just drive him around, what better way to like know what his entire daily itinerary is, like every day?
Absolutely. And I think they even explained it out really well because they're like, well, Fred Hampton doesn't want a car because he doesn't want to be like in the DMV register, he didn't want to get the license or something. He didn't like the paperwork, or it was like another reason for him to get pulled over.
Okay, right.
Because his name would be attached to the plate. So I think it was really clever writing that he was like, oh, he doesn't drive, so somebody has to drive him. I wonder if Fred Hampton actually had a driver for that reason, which I think is pretty clever.
And it's kind of like what they say about the metadata that they collect from cell phones being way more valuable than the actual content of the conversation.
Right.
Just knowing who you're talking to and when, like that's incredibly valuable. Exactly what you guys talked about. It's valuable, but it's not as valuable. So this is definitely a good spot for O'Neill to be in to do his job. The next thing I had was, I noticed, and I think it's really clear that the movie intentionally wanted us to see the contrast between O'Neill's apartment and Mitchell's house, because, the shot of him in his kind of shitty Chicago apartment was like unnecessary for any other reason. But then we immediately go to Mitchell's house, which isn't lavish, but it's definitely like, it might be O'Neill's first glimpse of what upper middle class white America looks like at home.
Right.
So I know it's intentional on the movie's part. I wonder how much intentionality to give to Mitchell on that. Let me put that to you. What do you think his thought process is here? I mean, he's introducing him.
He welcomed him in his home. He fed him. I think there's a number of things going on. One, I think it's developing a repertoire, and like a relationship and showing trust. Like, I've let you into my home. I trust you. But it's also kind of like you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you, kind of thing. Like I like, even though he used compromise against him, he also paid him, right? He was paying him money. And so for a person that's like an opportunist like O'Neill, he's not going to bite the hand that feeds him type of situation. And I think the other dynamic is basically, this is what your life could be. Stick with me, kid, and you're gonna climb the ladder with me as I'm going up. I think there's a lot with that scene, and I think it's really, really important for the storytelling of what's going on, especially since O'Neill was like a me and mine type of person.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've often been told that like the best way to convince someone is not through argument, but simply by representing, like being the kind of person that person would also like want to identify themselves as, to be like, to basically form a tribe, a tribal link. So yeah, I think there's something to that here. Like just and also, yeah, just showing that he's not, just, I don't know, a guy with a badge and a gun, in a police station.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, I'm a person, and I think it's also important to establish that yeah, look, I've been telling you that, you know, I want equality and stuff. And here I'm showing it to you because I'm bringing you into my home. You get to like see my infant child. I'm cooking you barbecue. Here's a cigar and a glass of whiskey. Like, you know, we're together. So I think the tribal thing you were talking about is a really good point. Like, I think that encompasses a lot of the dynamics going on with that scene. Is
Yeah,
that
to at least
this is
on its face, like break down this barrier, this inherent barrier of black and white.
uh
Try to make that barrier at least feel a somewhat porous.
right,
Like you said,
right.
like this could be you.
Yeah, exactly. Some of the other guys in the FBI decide to run a propaganda campaign to make all the Panthers look bad and look like they're inciting violence or that they're about to incite violence or something. You know, because Hampton was going around and he was going to reach out to the Crowns and try and organize. And one of the things you don't want if you're trying to prevent something from happening, and I think this is going to become really important in a little bit, but you don't want a unification. I remember it was a big deal when the Bloods and the Crips wanted to like have a peace, and I think there was some incitement by some organizations to prevent that because it was kind of scary. There was a movie about this called The Warriors, where there was a guy that wanted to join all the New York gangs because they had more of them than the police and they could just run the city. And so someone had that guy assassinated to prevent the unification, you know. So this is kind of like a similar story. Um, and so they're running like this propaganda campaign where they're printing out these flyers, but it's a lot of like white collar, Midwestern white men that have no idea how an African American in the like urban area of Chicago speaks, and they kept making stuff up. And I think this is going to make my number 3 worst tradecraft is not learning the vernacular of the people you're trying to impersonate.
Oh, I see.
Because they wrote this one line like dig in instead of like, you know, you dig or whatever it is. Like, you know, or like especially since I brought up the Warriors, you know, Cyrus is screaming, can you dig it? He didn't go dig in. Like, and because of that flyer, that's what got the Crowns to want to make an alliance with Fred Hampton because it was obvious somebody was trying to tear everybody apart or prevent like some sort of agreement. And they're pretty sure it was the government or FBI or something like that. And so that was a big mistake. Was look, if you're gonna impersonate a group, you better make sure how they actually talk. You can't just make shit up and be like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I've heard them say that. You know, that's already demonstrated your mistakes. And since we brought up the Battle of Algiers, this is that type of stuff we were talking about in our episode where the guy that was running the camera on the border focused in on the old man with the birds. Meanwhile, the 3 women crossing the border who were actually the ones there to bomb, like got overlooked because they were like kind of had this stereotype in their mind and they weren't eliminating their filters and their kind of biases that they had about this community. So instead of doing their time to research and learn things like accurately, they just kind of like manufactured these ideas in their head, and it actually bit them in the ass because the Crowns and the Black Panthers ended up joining forces. So I definitely pointed that as my number 3 worst tradecraft.
Okay, but with some minor plus spy points for it is a good idea.
That's yeah. As long as you do it right, you know. Yeah, so definitely you're right with a plus pipe. Like putting out propaganda, doing like false flag stuff. This happens all the time, you know. And I'm sure there were some successful missions of this, but for this film, it was important to have this mess up. And I'm sure there were mess ups like this during that time period where they just did not learn who they were trying to impersonate.
Right. And I don't think I saw in the movie that they, I mean, I can imply it, but I don't think they saw in the movie that they actually had knowledge that Hampton was planning to visit the Crowns. But that could have been just something that landed on the cutting room floor. They do have the meeting. I don't understand why the Crowns I mean, the display of force, the number of guys with guns that they have at the meeting is like absolutely overwhelming, and I'm not sure what the point of it is.
Well, I mean, I saw it as like a typical rivalry organizations. Like you'll see this in mafia films or like samurai films, like all the time, where like two kind of rival forces have a meeting, and then you go to their home. They're gonna be armed to the teeth because they think this might be a ploy to take them under. Like, you guys might be here to like overthrow us or something. And just so you know, we are not a force to be we like to be overlooked or like taken lightly. That's kind of how I saw that. But yeah, it was definitely pretty gratuitous. But it just always reminded me of those mafia films or like a samurai film or something like that, where like a rival like daimyo or like warlord shows up in like a different person, their rival's house, and like everybody's got like just shit out on them, and they can't be armed. They could have just taken them out right then and there, type of thing. But yeah, no, I think it was a little much, but it makes for a good movie.
Maybe it's also a good opportunity for the Crown's leader to like look Fred Hampton in the eye and see that he's not cowed,
Yes, that's true.
To see that he's serious, and that, because if you are going to even consider allying with these guys, you want to know that that they've got straight fucking backbones.
Right. And they're disciplined. And there was a whole thing about discipline in this where they were training the new Panthers, and that one guy who recognized O'Neill started screaming, and then like all the Crowns dude, like the capos of the Crowns were like, you're not supposed to speak out of turn. They nipped that in the butt like immediately. There was a whole thing about discipline and militant organization and stuff, which they got a lot from reading Castro and Che Guevara and stuff like that.
Oh, cool. So because it's apparently one of the guys from the initial scene where O'Neill fails to steal a car with his fake FBI badge.
Yeah,
is present at the Crown's meeting. He is a Crown, and he challenges him on it. And, as you say, he gets slapped down for speaking out of turn. They don't want to like hear his shit, but they're gonna leave the meeting okay. But I think my number one worst has to be that's a thread that never got resolved, because you're not supposed to speak up during the meeting. I understand that. But afterwards, there's got to be a process where the guy says, hey, look, whoever my immediate superior is, I need to tell you something about one of those guys. It's really important. It's really important.
Right. Yeah, on the Crown side, we didn't get that, but on the Panthers side, we did. The woman, I guess, was a guard for Hampton. Mm-hmm. Pulls a gun on O'Neill and makes him like hotwire the car, because she was like, "What the hell was all that FBI shit?" And he had to tell her the whole scam he used to run. Funny enough, because he was an FBI informant at that point.
My private nickname for that chick is Spitfire. She's fucking awesome. Yeah. I liked her a lot. And I appreciated and noticed that when they did, she's the one that takes the lead on interrogating him about that situation and checking out his backstory. And I appreciate the fact they keep Hampton completely out of it. He's not
right.
present. He doesn't need to be.
He doesn't. Yeah.
He doesn't need to get his hands dirty with this stuff. And if it is a Fed, then first thing, just create distance. Get our most important piece safely out of the situation.
Right. This is when we start moving into more recruitment. But there's something really big that was very powerful that I wanted to talk about. Fred Hampton goes to the Puerto Rican gang. I think they were Puerto Ricans, right? I believe so.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that was I think the Young Lords or the Lords.
Right.
That was the Young Lords group. That is a real group from the time.
And he also went to the white supremacist group or the Confederate. I'm not sure what organization they were, but with a giant Confederate flag, I'm pretty sure they were white supremacists. And Fred Hampton, being just a charming speaking kind of guy was able to unite the Panthers, the white supremacists, and the Puerto Ricans based on, hey, we're all poor. They're trying to divide us. We need to be united. And successfully did that. I want to make that my number 2 best tradecraft of the film. That was huge. I did not know that about Fred Hampton. And when I looked it up and he actually did do that, that just boggled my mind. Because I've been saying stuff like that forever. That's what's going on. It's like the people that are kind of like shat on are being divided type of thing. And if they ever pulled and this is what gets Hoover's attention for the most part, was that he was able to unite these groups that are already powerful groups on their own, but now you're putting them all together. Now they're kind of even a bigger group that's kind of Hoover would consider a big threat. And so I really wanted to make that my number 2 best tradecraft. 1, Hampton even having the charisma to pull that off, and 2, just the idea from like a revolutionary activist standpoint, where it's just like, no, we can't be fighting with these people. We need to get unified and stand up for the actual problem. And that's what he did, and that's what made Hoover force someone to arrest him for something stupid, which I think was stolen ice cream, which he never did.
Right, stolen ice cream. Yeah, gets what was it, 7 fucking years or something?
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I mean, I think he got good behavior or something, but
crazy.
Whatever. It was silly.
I think what should we call it? O'Neill was only up for 5 years for impersonating a federal officer. Jeez. So
they really threw the book at Hampton.
Yeah, they really would have to manufacture 1 million. But that's definitely how prosecutors work today. Is right. Whatever the crime is, they come up with 20 different things to charge you on,
right?
Just to ramp up the amount of time that you'll be facing, and the whole game is to force a plea deal, so that it doesn't have to go to court. And the reason for that is because we have so many. We just don't have enough justice system to go through and give everyone the amount of, civil rights, justice rights, whatever it is, all your protections that you have against the state, just crushing you for no reason, your
right.
rights as a defendant. We have so much of that in the system that, was put there in the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And it's to the point where we really can't give everyone, honestly, it sounds shitty to say, but, and I'm not justifying it or something, or saying well, that's just how it is, because it does suck, but we literally do not have the resources to afford everyone their constitutional rights. And that's why the prosecutorial system is completely out of control, because it's a way of managing that.
Well, that's what the plea deal is for.
Right.
That's why they offer lower sentences, just keep it moving if we can, which, yeah, I agree.
Right. But the whole game to force the plea deal out is to threaten you with as many years in prison as humanly possible.
Oh, yeah. This is what you could be facing. Take the deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's pretty shitty.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Fred goes to jail for a while. And a kind of a bunch of stuff happens here in this part of the movie, mm-hmm. where kind of, I don't know, it just feels like some disconnected events. Each of the events in and of itself, I appreciated, but on my second close watch, I didn't really see how a lot of them literally drove the story, which is going to be often a problem with, when you make a movie based on real events, the more realistic you get, the less of a coherent story. The more committed you are to getting the facts right, the harder it's going to be to have everything fit into the kind of tight interlocking story kind of mechanism that you get
Right.
when that you have the the liberty to do when you're writing a pure fiction, or if you're willing to take like increased liberties with the characters. So I mean, I think one of the big ones, probably like kind of one of the biggest things in the movie that happens, that like it goes to the I guess it goes to the message of the movie, but doesn't exactly interlock with the story, is where this other Black Panther Party member from another chapter has come to Chicago seeking refuge because he's killed someone.
Mm-hmm.
And O'Neill's going to report that to Mitchell. Mitchell's going to go and report that to his superior. His superior is going to say, ha ha ha, check this out. That guy, the murderer, he's one of ours. He's an FBI informant. And every place that he goes, we can get a search warrant for, because he's wanted for murder.
Wow. Yeah, that was really, really like slick.
It's my number one best tradecraft. It's really, really fucking dirty. And, the fact that he's wanted for murder, but they have no interest in actually arresting him at all.
Right.
Because
Right.
the fact that he's wanted for murder is what, triggers this whole like search warrant trick. So they want him to visit, I think I think Mitchell's shitty boss even says something like, yeah, he's in the briefing room right now. We're getting ready to plan out his next step on his national tour.
Right.
They want him to go to as many Black Panther, I don't know, houses, safe houses, headquarters, offices, as possible, because each one of them they can hit. Although I guess at a certain point, somebody might detect a pattern there.
Right. Yeah. Every house he visits gets hit. But not if all your heads of security are moles. That's going to make my number one worst tradecraft, is that these different chapters promoted not one but two moles and however many. This is something I really wanted to talk about for this film. Mm-hmm. I don't know how accurate this is with the Black Panthers, but watching this story pan out, I really kind of was irritated by the Black Panthers for not having like effective counterintelligence.
Preach it.
Yeah, especially since they worshipped Che Guevara and Fidel Castro. And Fidel Castro like set up Cuba specifically to prevent CIA penetration. And it was like pretty much like impossible for us to get in there. It's something that really bothered me. And I don't know if this was a story choice for the film or if this was actually accurate for Hampton's chapter. But the fact that two chapters promoted their head of security and both of them were moles is like a huge deal. That is like an enormous penetration for reasons that you just discussed. Because not only do you have guys that could just freely go in and out, there's actually no oversight to prevent more moles from getting in because your heads of security are the moles. So that's going to make my number one worst tradecraft. And I'm like, I want to believe, especially since most of the Panthers was organized based off of Cuba, and like kind of what Che Guevara had like sketched out, as well as like Fidel Castro. I would like to believe the Black Panthers had much better counterintelligence than this, because it's not in the movie whatsoever.
Because I mean, Castro's regime was founded on the idea of counterintelligence, right?
Right. I mean, and I'm actually reading a book on counterintelligence that discusses how difficult it was dealing with Cuba, and like what a like thorn in the side that entire piece of history was. So I think this has got to be a story choice, because it's very hard for me to believe that it would be this easy to get two FBI informants in as the heads of security. But whatever.
Yeah.
Apparently it was real because O'Neill was, and he was praised for how brutal he was. I guess that's how he proved his loyalties, was just being a really brutal security guy.
Who, O'Neill?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate as well. I guess I'm not sure exact. Well, sort of the movie kind of implies, but we never get exactly like Mitchell, like what O'Neill's mission statement is. How
Right.
much it's just supposed to be like just gather information on the Panthers, or how much it is like specifically targeting Fred Hampton. Definitely in the movie, it's a focus on Fred Hampton.
Right.
But if if that's true, then it's even like more laudable that even with Fred in prison and like off the table, O'Neill's working overtime, being a really, really good fucking villager.
Right.
As you say, he works his way up to head of security, and we've got this part where the police blow up the Chicago BPP headquarters, and you can see O'Neill like really, really passionately leading and organizing and getting the shit back together. He's being a damn good villager. Plus 5 points for him on that.
Absolutely.
I don't know if this is worth talking about or for how long. I mean, maybe just a brief mention, but maybe it's just because I'm a video gamer and not an actual gun enthusiast. But do shotguns really have the kind of range that they show in that standoff? Like, the first thing I thought when Spitfire aims a shotgun out of a second-story window at cops that are on the other side of the street, I'm like, bitch, you need to put that thing away. And like you are.
Well, the length of those barrels, they're probably used for shooting birds, and they could have been using slugs as ammunition and not like bird shot. But I agree with you. I don't know why they had shotguns. That you would definitely want rifles. I mean, across the street isn't as far as you would think, but yeah, you're right. The spread of like a regular shotgun would not be that accurate, and it probably wouldn't do very much damage unless they were firing slugs. Which even then, those aren't going to go that far.
I was just curious. I mean, I'm ignorant. Like, maybe I just don't understand shotguns. But I'll tell you one thing. Like in Call of Duty, that is definitely outside of shotgun range.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all I know.
Yeah. No, that's a good catch, and I think it's a valid point to spend a few seconds on.
We're going to call it right here and call that our first half of our tradecraft analysis of Judas and the Black Messiah. Join us next week for more.